Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Our Community Stories. Thank you for joining us. We will be featuring the Algonquin Club, and I will tell you a little bit more about them in just a second. But before we begin, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on Our Community Stories. As you know, Durham is a place of diverse cultures, experiences, and perspectives. In our very rich history, some stories are incomplete, hidden, or sometimes forgotten. And Our Community Stories is dedicated to sharing history from Durham's marginalized and underrepresented communities, because these stories help us to have a fuller understanding of Durham and how it came to be. They help us to remember and acknowledge wrongs that may have happened along the way, which is an important part of healing. And they can also inspire us and help us to reimagine a future where everyone feels safe, supported, and in charge of their own destiny. So thank you for joining us today. Again, we will be featuring the Algonquin Club, which it was a community of African-American residents in Durham in the 1920s through the 1960s. They're very passionate about tennis, and I'm so honored to have several of those members on today's event. They'll share stories of joys, struggles, and the lasting impact of their community. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening and respecting these stories. This is brought to you by the City of Durham, Neighborhood Improvement Services Department, and the Community Engagement Team. But today's event was also assembled by the Durham Parks and Recreation. And thank you to their staff and leadership for making today's event happen. And at this point, I will turn it over to our former City Council member, one-time City of Durham historian, but really always City of Durham historian, Eddie Davis.
Thank you so much, Laura. And thank all of you in the audience for joining us. Thank you, Laura, for including this Algonquin Tennis Club in the neighborhoods, because it was a neighborhood within many different communities around Durham. So it's important that we recognize the club and its value to the citizens of Durham, the residents of Durham and beyond, because there were many people who came to the Algonquin Club who were not necessarily folks from Durham, but beyond. But we want to let the audience know about the background and the history of the club. And in order to do that, we're going to ask Wanda Garrett to be the first speaker and to give us some of the background on the Algonquin Tennis Club. Wanda, welcome.
Hello, I am Wanda Garrett, a member of the Algonquin Historical Marker Committee. Today, we are gathered under the gracious auspices of the W.D. Hill Community Center staff, led by Andre White, Alex Hurdle, and Marcus Hughes, who have worked with us over the time. This W.D. Hill community site has had several iterations as nursery school, lunchroom, banquet hall, Wayfarer Inn, business league, promoter of the arts. For bridge games, it was a dance hall. And years ago, Hillside students simply referred to it as the Rec. Today, we are focusing on this center as the Algonquin Clubhouse and Tennis Association. There are several local tennis notables who were either taught or inspired by Algonquin, such as Joe Williams, Irwin Holmes Jr., John Lucas Jr., Bonnie Logan, Bernadette Hopkins, George Cox, George Jones, Mark Fisher IV, Al Smith, the Creed Boys, and the Barnes brothers. Oh, and Skippy Scarborough. Those are some who come to this octogenarian mind. I know I've missed many. Why Algonquin? The Algonquin Native American tribe stretched from eastern North Canada to the Roanoke River in North Carolina. The Algonquins were nomadic fishers in the mild seasons, living in portable teepees so that they could follow the fish. But in cold winters, they lived in community longhouse lodges. Near the St. Lawrence Seaway, these Native Americans established a famous resort, which was frequented by wealthy New York businessmen. It is thought that the resort inspired the development of the Algonquin Hotel in New York City, where literary giants gathered for lunch daily over a 10-year period during the 1920s and 30s, becoming known as the famous Algonquin Round Table. Now, none of this was lost on the well-traveled, sophisticated Black professionals of Durham, North Carolina, who traveled and came back home to found their own Algonquin Round Table. We will hear stories about personal experiences with the Algonquin. We will begin with Nathan T. Garrett, followed by H. McKinley Michaud. Those two gentlemen are really community stalwarts. They have been generous with their time, their talents, and sometimes their treasure to help make Durham a vibrant community. They grew up at Algonquin. Nathan and Mickey will be followed by family members of Mary Newby, who, along with Nesbitt, became the face of hospitality at the Algonquin Club. Then we will hear from the visionary, Dr. Victor Mafo, who is the original motivating force for that historical marker that we can see from this site. All will ultimately be pulled together by our unflinching chairperson, Eddie Davis. Some people call him Mr. History. So, Nathan.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Garrett. I was born in Tarboro, North Carolina in 1931. And I'm going to have to tell you that I'm in my 90th year, so I will do my best to talk to you as I should. My family moved in 1933. My father was a pharmacist and had a drugstore on Pettigrew Street near downtown. And it was 2 blocks from Main Street, and really across the street from the drugstore was the railroad tracks. I guess I said that the drugstore was named Garrett's Biltmore Drugstore. If I didn't, I apologize. My father purchased a house at 1502 Fayetteville Street in 1934, and that was 4 structures due south of this structure that we are in right now. Just 4 structures south. My parents joined Algonquin, which was made up of middle-class Black families. However, there was a man named Sam Moore who was a cabinet maker and who had a lot of skills in putting stuff together. And where he did that was right next to the Algonquin tennis courts. And what he said, because everybody else that was coming had to be, middle class. He said, well, okay, I will take over the tennis courts if you'll let me bring in some other people. And that's exactly what happened. Because we were members of Algonquin, my brother Oliver, who was born in 1927, learned how to play tennis. And he taught me something about playing tennis. Also, he and I were invited to holiday gatherings at the clubhouse here. And actually, here's a photograph that I'm looking at. I hope you are. A photograph of one of those gatherings, including showing Oliver, which is me way in the back, me and about 30 other people. Oliver continued to improve his tennis skills, and in 1946, and here, Mickey Michaud and I might have a disagreement, but I claim 1946 for my brother. At any rate, he was enrolled at North Carolina College, and he was selected to captain the North Carolina College tennis team. I continued to learn from him until I graduated at Hillside High School in 1948 and went off to college. John Wheeler, who was president of Mechanics and Farmers Bank, was one of the best adult tennis players that I can recall at Algonquin. He also worked very, very hard to establish the Durham Committee on Negro Affairs, which held meetings regularly at Algonquin. Another adult that who played well here was a Mr. Cook. I've forgotten his first name, but Mickey Michaud might be able to provide that for you. At any rate, he also, Mr. Cook, also attended the organization, the Negro Affairs organization. And Mr. Cook had a daughter named Joyce who also played tennis. But the adult people here at the Algonquin really worked hard at helping the Black business people to serve the Durham community. But back to tennis. In the summers, the American Tennis Association and the Southeastern Tennis Association arranged tournaments at Algonquin and at other courts that had been built for Black people. Oliver played at these tournaments and very often finished first, but never lower than fourth. But finally, a medical doctor at Lynchburg, Virginia, named Robert Whirlwind Johnson, and another doctor named Hubert Eaton in Wilmington, North Carolina, both of whom had tennis courts in their backyards. Anyway, they invited two young Black tennis players to play at their courts and to use adult players to help them with their games. Those tennis players were Althea Gibson, who won, Althea Gibson, because, they were both at the Algonquin tennis facilities, and that helped them to gain the skills that they needed. And this was the result. Althea Gibson, who was born in South Carolina in 1927, I think. At least, anyway, she was born there. And in 1930, her family moved to New York. And while there in New York, she learned something about tennis and then was assisted in learning more about tennis by the American Tennis Association. Arthur Ashe was born in Richmond, Virginia in 1943. But these people won tennis matches. Althea won 2 professional tennis tournaments in the French Open in Paris. She also won a professional tennis, professional games or tournament at the US Open in New York. And she also won she won one at Wimbledon in England. At any rate, Arthur won once at Wimbledon, once in Australia, and once at the US Open. These were the 2 Blacks to win this kind of tennis. And here's a photo of Althea Gibson with John Wheeler and I believe some coaches.
Tell your story.
Incidentally, I never played Arthur, but I did play, I never played Althea, but I did play Arthur once at Algonquin. I arranged for Arthur to play a match consisting of 5 games, and whoever won 5 games would win the match. We played. Arthur won 2 games, and I won 3. I won. But I have to tell you that at that time, Arthur was 9 years old because we had played the match in 1952. And as I said earlier, he was born in 93, and that difference is 9 years. But I was 12 years older than Arthur Ashe because, as I said earlier, I had been born in 1931. Thank you.
Now, Nathan, before you go, so you played against Arthur, and even though there was this age difference, you could tell then that he was going to be a great player down the road.
Yes, that's why I asked him to play against me.
Great. Well, good. Those are just some good history, and the fact that at the Algonquin Tennis Club, Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe both graced the courts there. And I really like the fact that you brought in Sam Moore, the fact that he was the keeper of those courts, and he was involved with lots of different other activities. Was he also the gentleman that was involved in the Soapbox Derby tournaments here in Durham?
Oh, yes, but I thought I didn't have time, but if you want to hear about that, yes.
Well, just the fact that he was the person there, so great. As Wanda has said, we have Mickey Mishaw on deck and ready to go. So Mickey, would you unmute yourself and share some of those same stories?
Thank you, Eddie, for giving me this opportunity. My remembrances of the Algonquin Tennis Club are pretty numerous. I can barely remember, but I do remember the very first meeting, one of the very first meetings of the Durham Committee on Negro Affairs, which is now the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. My mother was having club meeting at home, and my father had to babysit me. I was about 5, maybe 6 years old, and I can remember sitting in this room with all these old Black men who were talking what I don't know, but later grew up to know about. But it was the Durham Committee on Negro Affairs at that time. And like I say, my introduction to the Algonquin Tennis Club and the Algonquin Clubhouse. One of my other remembrances of that was when my brother was born in 1941. My father and I, while my mother was in the hospital, had to have our meals at the Algonquin Tennis Club. And one thing I learned from that experience was that there was a room that had a pool table in it. And that room was strictly reserved for the elderly gentlemen in the Algonquin who would go back there, smoke cigars, and shoot pool. But the other, I guess, more famous thing that Algonquin was noted for was its association with the American Tennis Association, which at that time was the leading association of Black tennis players nationwide. The Southeastern Tennis Association and the American Tennis Association formed the Southeastern Tournament here at the Algonquin Club and produced some of the many players that came to Durham to participate in the Southeastern Tournament, the tournament that Nathan mentioned. I think on the picture on the left that you have on your screen, you see the first person to your left is Jimmy Ford. The person next to him, sort of behind him, is George Logan, Durham fellow. Just barely in front of George is Biff Henderson, and just behind Biff is Arthur Ashe, and then the last person is Benny Tatum. All of these played here at the Algonquin. Ashe eventually, as Nathan mentioned, went on to make great strides in tennis. I was fortunate enough to have gone to to Lynchburg, Virginia, where Whirlwind Johnson, that Nathan mentioned, ran a summer training camp for young Black players. And I helped coach Arthur at that training camp. The same thing happened in Wilmington with Dr. Eaton's home with Althea Gibson and the young ladies who were playing tennis at the time. The other picture on the right is a picture of the first tennis team that North Carolina Central University formed. This was the 1949 tennis team. To the left is Q Willis. Next to Q Willis is Mickey Michaud. Next to Mickey is Troy Weaver. Next to Troy Weaver is Nathan's brother Oliver. And next to Oliver is Billy Davis. I have to give you information about Billy. Billy came down to play in the Southeastern Tennis Association tournament. And that was where Floyd Brown, who was the first coach of the tennis team and had one scholarship to give for tennis, recruited Billy Davis to come here and play tennis for North Carolina Central. And that was the first time in 1949, the 48-49 school year, was the first year that North Carolina Central had a tennis team. That was also the year that we played, and we were runner-up in the CIAA championships at that time. But the Algonquin Club had just many, many other facets to it that folks really, to this day, I miss. I had a cousin who taught school in Durham, who stayed here at the Algonquin Tennis Club while she was teaching school here in Durham. There were many other meetings of the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People until the Algonquin Clubhouse burned, and then they moved that to the library. But I think the most outstanding feature of Algonquin was the fact that many, many famous Black tennis players came through the 3 tennis courts we had in the back. Basically, that's my story.
Let me ask you a couple of questions based on what you just said there. Looking at that picture on the left, you mentioned that the person in the very front is Biff Henderson.
Yep.
And
That's
Biff
Biff.
Henderson, for people who may not know, used to be was a stage manager for the David Letterman show.
That's absolutely correct. And Biff and Arthur played doubles. Fact of the matter was that the reason they played doubles was Miss Bess Whitted, who handled the juniors in the Southeastern Tennis Association, had Arthur staying with Biff and Biff's home. And one night they just said, well, Arthur, I said, Biff, why don't you play with Arthur in the doubles? For these were the really youngsters. And that's how Biff and Arthur got to play doubles.
And the person to the, I guess, the right of Biff there, you said his name is Troy Weaver. Was he connected to
No, you're talking about the college photo. The person standing to my left is Troy Weaver.
Okay, so was that Troy Weaver connected at all with the Weaver's Cleaners?
That's right. That's Edward Troy Weaver. And Troy also played first string basketball in North Carolina Central, which was North Carolina College at Durham at the time.
And back to the photograph on the left, you mentioned that there was a Logan. Was that George Logan?
That's George Logan. Bonnie Logan is his sister, who also.
Well, I wanted to get to Bonnie Logan because it wasn't just boys that played. There were girls that played in those tournaments also, right?
That's exactly right. You had Bonnie Logan and Wilma Dillard and a host of other young ladies that played and were raised right here on the Algonquin Tennis Club tennis courts.
Great. Well, that's a wonderful history. And let's go back to the college tennis team. The person from the second from the left there is a young college Mickey Michelle.
That's who that is, believe it or not. I'm looking at it right now and wondering, hey, I've grown a little bit.
Well, good. These are some wonderful historic photographs. And I'm so glad that you and Nathan were able to deal with it. Wanda, you mentioned something earlier about some of the social activities and the fact that Mrs. Newby was there. Did you want to introduce the Newby family?
I thought I had done that. I'm so sorry. Of course. Please put them on.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you for having us. I am Evelyn G Roberts. I am the niece of Mary Lawson Newby, and my daughter is Melissa Roberts, and she's also on this committee, the Algonquin committee also, and she's the great niece of Mary Lawson Newby. And we are happy to be here today. My aunt was an outstanding person, not only in the family, but the community. And she was born in 1890. I also like to bring to the forefront that she started out being a school teacher and became married to an AME minister who was Dangerfield Newby Jr. She gave up her teaching position, and in the process of giving it up, she was confronted with the committee people from the Algonquin Clubhouse Tennis Club to take on this position of being the general manager, of which she did accept. I am really proud of her because I look back not only at her, but I also look back at my parents. And I look at it from the standpoint of what I remember out of all of it in my youth days and how much I remember it now in the years that are coming forward. And I looked at it from the standpoint that I was very inquisitive. I always wanted to know why, who, what. And my parents and my aunt never pushed me away. They always answered my questions. They involved me in everything that I asked. And I was forever up under my aunt, especially during my junior high and high school years, because I was leave school and come and assist my aunt in whatever she wanted me to do. I ran errands for her, and believe it or not, through the bus system, because the bus stop was right across the street. Then as years went on, I was able to get my license and I could drive and do errands for her also. Plus, she taught me a lot in the fact of her being the general manager, that how she could multitask different functions that were going on at the clubhouse. Because sometimes she had two functions going on at one time, but the structure of the clubhouse was wherein you could have a small affair on one end of the building, and you could have a larger social on the other end. And I was really amazed at how she could get all these two different things done, and they never were in conflict with each other. She had a lot of assistants from whom she hired as a chef, Jesse Hayes, along with other people and teenagers that would come in, and the young guys would be waiters, and she could have younger ladies to be the hostesses. And I learned a lot about multitasking. She taught it in a way wherein you felt comfortable when you went to her with a question. You didn't have to feel inferior about asking her, and she nurtured you with whatever she wanted you to do. The highlights of my other sites came at the birthday parties, my birthday parties. And I really have to thank my aunt and my parents and my classmates and friends, as you can tell, were very, very in attendance. And it was like year after year after year until the ending of the Algonquin Tennis Club. I also like to reiterate the fact that my aunt was a friend prior to the Algonquin Tennis Club of Dr. Paula Murray. And as she would come in town, my aunt would give a luncheon for her, where the ladies of the community and the different areas and places would come, and they would greet each other. That's another highlight. Another thing I would like to recollect the fact, and Miss Bessie Whittett's name had been brought up before, but I want to bring her up from the standpoint where I remember her in two different settings. The first setting I remembered her in was when she was given "This Is Your Life," Miss Bessie Whittett. And it was done at the North Carolina College Auditorium, B. Duke Auditorium. But the thing that I remember best about it was the fact that the reception came back and was done at the Algonquin Tennis Club. And at that time, Althea Gibson and other noted persons came back to the reception. The next thing I can remember is the fact that we still have the possessions of the tablecloths and the dishes that my aunt used during those receptions. My daughter had a chance to meet Althea Gibson also And this was after my aunt had given up and retired out of the clubhouse. The next thing I was intended to mention at the same time was Miss Bessie Whitted. When we were teenagers, Miss Bessie Whitted and Dr. Rose Butler Brown set up for us as teenagers what was called Youth Wants to Know. And we had a certain Sunday afternoon that we would come to the clubhouse and have our meetings. And we could ask the different questions that we as teenagers wanted to know. They brought in different facilitators to participate and answer our questions. So those are just some of the highlights between the birthday parties, the social events, the banquets. And I also enjoyed just a little bit of tennis. I didn't become as active, but I did play tennis. And I still have my tennis racket. But I really enjoyed being under my aunt, Mary Newby. And I really appreciate the fact. Thank you.
Outstanding. And the picture on the left, is that you at the piano?
That's me at the piano. That's the piano she gave me that particular year for my birthday.
Okay. And
Yes.
is that Mrs. Newby? It says right here, here is Mrs. Newby.
This is she standing beside her car. And this is in front of the house, the clubhouse.
Good. It used to be that people could tell these cars. That looks like it might have been a 1952 Chevy.
You're right. And it was green.
Uh-huh.
And believe it or not, I still have what you call the purchase order that she bought it. I still have that in my possession.
Great, great.
Yes.
Now, so what we have, if you look at the photograph of Mrs. Newby and the car, is that the piece of the old Algonquin club there to the left side of the photograph?
The left is the front of the building.
Okay, we don't have very many.
Excuse me.
We don't have very many.
Oh, excuse me.
No, well, we don't have very many pictures of the actual clubhouse, so that may be as close as we can get in some cases to the way the Algonquin club actually looked.
I think I might have had a picture, but I'm not sure if Melissa submitted that particular picture.
Okay. Oh, that sounds good. Now, I really like the fact that that Mrs. Newby organized talk discussions for the young people. And in many ways, it's sort of a evolution, because Wanda Garrett is on with us right now, and she did some of the same kinds of things, not just for youth, but for the entire community on WTVD several years later. So in many ways, the heritage and the legacy of the Algonquin Tennis Club has lived in many different iterations along the way. So Wanda, thank you so much for everything you've done over the years to serve this community. We want to talk a little bit, Mickey mentioned a little bit about the formation of the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. And that's very, very important for us to mention here. So let me go back to that once again. I think, Mickey, we are now in maybe the 85th, 86th year of the Durham Committee. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
And
it was
the
formed in 1935.
Okay, great. So that's important for us to know that here again, things that happen here at the Algonquin Tennis Club continue to roll down and are still emanating and playing out in the lives of the people here in Durham right now. So this club.
Can I ask Ms. Roberts a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Roberts, I asked you this before, but I'm still puzzled. Why did Ms. Newby leave teaching? to come manage a clubhouse with a bunch of hard-headed men at the time?
You know, that is a very good question. And as I kind of reflect back, because you did ask me once before, but I think she gave up teaching because she was one of those kind of teachers that she enjoyed going outside of the box to teach. At that
The reason I raised her was she was one of my fourth grade teachers.
Yeah, you told me that. Yeah. But you know, I think she brought, as I look back, and I enjoyed her, and I think others did too. I think she brought some of her interest and projectionist into the clubhouse because she was truly enthused at everything she did, and she nurtured not only me, but as I had said before, she nurtured everyone who came through as a student or a non-student. So I think that, and I think she was able to do it at her own pace. And I think when she was a school teacher, and well, you know, as you hold a job, you have to go up under the criteria of what they required. So when she took on the Algonquin Tennis Club, she was able to be what you might say free to nurture how she wanted to nurture a student or a person. So I'm hoping I answered you the best I could.
I think he was really talking about those hard-headed men around there, but she kept them in control.
She definitely did. And believe it or not, they respected her. They respected her to the utmost. And I look back now, which I did see it then, but you know, when you look back and you, as they say, looking back over my life, and I realized, you know, believe it or not, she did not have any problems with them. And even when she did have to reprimand them, it was done by respect on both her side and the person to whom she was reprimanding.
Well,
and
great.
so those are the things that I think she couldn't do actually the way she wanted to in the school.
Well, great. Well, you know, Mickey said that sometimes meals were served on a regular basis, particularly because Mrs. Newby and others prepared meals for the traveling business people that were coming through. And one of those people who actually stayed at the Algonquin Tennis Club because of his association with North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company is Dr. E. Victor Mafo, who came to Durham in the early 1960s. And the good thing is that he is here with us today. So Dr. Mafo, welcome. The 94-year-old Dr. Mafo, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Good. Now this picture on the left is of you shaking hands with Asa Spalding. And I often love that double-breasted suit that you were wearing back in those days. Can you tell us a little bit about your first relationship with the Algonquin Tennis Club?
Thank you very much, Brother Eddie and Representative Mickey Michelle, my brother Nathan Garrett and his wife Wanda, for you accepting to help me to bring this story to life. I never thought I would live long enough or I would come back to Durham to be a part of what is going on today. But my association with North Carolina Mutual started with a man called Dr. Warren Harrison, who was a surgeon at Lincoln Hospital. And that was in the 60s, probably before the 60s, because he got the idea that North Carolina Mutual was a good example for capital formation for Blacks. So he had wanted to have an insurance company in Ghana. And he wanted somebody who would be interested to come and learn from the ground up and other things. So thank God I was a lucky guy who was accepted to be here. And that's when I arrived in Durham in November, soon after Thanksgiving. And the North Carolina Mutual company was having their board meeting. So I was invited to the meeting, and that's where you see me with Dr. Issa T. Spalding Sr. welcoming me to Durham. So if it had not been for Dr. David Warren Harrison, this program would not have been taking place. And I want that to be noted. Also, Mrs. Margaret Goodwin was the one who welcomed me and picked me up at the Greyhound bus station and brought me to the Algonquin Tennis Club house. And when I got there, there was a man standing called Mr. Leroy Frazier, who introduced himself as the agency director of North Carolina Mutual and turned me over to Mrs. Newby, who became my American mother away from home. So Evelyn, thank you for sharing your aunt with me. And you're talking about meals. We'll talk about that later. Not only was he a good cook, but he was also a good entrepreneur. She was the one who introduced me to Ernest Thompson, Chris Johnson. Ernest Thompson was the one who supplied oil for the house to keep it warm and air conditioned and everything in those days. And Chris Johnson, who has fallen asleep, was the mechanic who serviced the place. Also, Gardner Oil Company. And not only was Mrs. Newby what we are talking about here now, but she was a model of leadership for the city of Durham. And he was a very staunch member of Emmanuel AME Zion Church, which used to be on Kent Street, now on Riddle Road. And he will always invite me to church or activities around town. So that's how I got to know a little bit about Durham.
Yes. And you also later worked at North Carolina Central?
I worked at North Carolina Central University, again, thanks to North Carolina Mutual. When I came, my background was in education and social welfare. I had no business background, so North Carolina Mutual arranged for me to take courses at North Carolina College at the time, where I got my first master's degree. At that time, they called it Masters of Commerce. So this is how I got to be at North Carolina Central. But my thesis was on North Carolina Mutual Company, a process for capital formation. So that's how I got my job at North Carolina Central.
Okay. Now, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but many people can see that there is a marker in front of the W.D. Hill Recreation Center on Fayetteville Street that commemorates the Algonquin Tennis Club. Now, you are the person that I think is most responsible for feeding the idea to the North Carolina Historic Marker Office. And that took place a couple of years ago, right?
Yes, it did. And now you see the team, people who helped me to do this: Evelyn, Eddie, Mrs. Garrett, Cora Coleman, Walter Jackson, Nathan Ward, and Dr. Howard Fitz, and Dr. Johnson, who is a professor of history at North Carolina Central. Now that's how we started, but the idea came in when I left town. When I came back, I was looking for the Algonquin Tennis Club house. Of course, it was deteriorating at that time when I left, but I understand it burned down. And I thought that it was a very important historical point in Durham history, because that was a place where the idea of forming Lincoln Hospital, Lincoln Nursing School, Mechanics and Farmers Bank and other places started. And all was due to a man that we have to always remember called John Merrick. And so I said, well, it looked like Durham was going down and we have to remember some things. So fortunately, after hitting left and right, I was able to get the attention of Brother Eddie, who joined me. And in fact, he did most of the work, not me. And finally, we got in touch with Mrs. Inslee at Raleigh, who is the secretary, executive director for the historical markers. And so that marker standing there is not my doing. It is all of you doing. But if you say it is my doing, well, I accept it to say that thank you for making me a part of Durham. And for that matter, that marker is my thank you signal to all of you and to let you that I am proud and humble to be a part of you.
It's interesting that the photo, that team that you see there, many of whom are on this call today, it's very important that we recognize the cooperative work that took place. The folks at the marker committee did not want to have that marker up without including the Durham committee because of its founding here at the Algonquin Tennis Club. So we went back and forth at different meetings. Wanda and Nathan actually went to one of the meetings on the night of their anniversary and helped us to lobby for the approval of that meeting. So it was wonderful. Of course, Mickey was there, Walter Jackson, all the people that you see in the photograph. Evelyn was there on many occasions and helped to facilitate meetings that we had at the Sanford Warren Library. And the picture on the left there is the picture of Dr. Mafo unveiling the marker in August of 2018. And you can see Mickey in that photograph and several other people. And the program that we had after the unveiling was coordinated and moderated by our own Nathan and Wanda Garrett. So they've been with us, all these people have been with us the whole time. It was a team effort, but the idea, the brainchild came from Dr. E. Victor Mafo. And people talk about how he came all the way from Ghana to help us to get that marker out there.
Well, thank you very much. I want to draw your attention to a very important statement made by Mr. John Merrick when he was getting all these things together. And he said, as long as it is God's will, I want this institution to move from men to support their families, and God will let it live. That is what I'm interested about. And God knows it. I want this institution to live, and she will live. And when I came, the motto for North Carolina Mutual was, there's no house which is complete without the Stonks. The Stonks is one of the old historical markers in Egyptian history that some of you may know about, just as you know about the hanging garden of Babylon.
Yes.
And so I think that it is a very important day for me and for you too, for us to be proud of our heritage. God bless you all. Thank you for making me a part of you. And I am very, very grateful.
Well, this is good. Perhaps we'll turn it back over to Wanda and maybe we can entertain some questions. Are there questions, Laura? Are there questions that have come forth?
Yes, there are actually several questions, but we've actually reached our time. So I will share the questions with you after today, and maybe we can post some responses or links when we post the recording of this video. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who has shared questions and comments and thanks in the chat. As always, you can find recordings of today's event will be posted on the city's YouTube page. There's a specific list that's just all of our community stories events so far. This is our 13th, our lucky number 13 so far. So thank you for everyone who's been a part of those. And they live on there. They're also on our website, durhamcommunityengagement.org. And they also show from time to time on the local access channel, the Durham Television Network. Thank you to everyone who participated today, who helped make the event possible, especially the WD Hill staff from Parks and Recreation. We really appreciate you bringing the story to us, and the amazing people and relationships that have been here to speak today. And as always, our Neighborhood Improvement Services staff and leadership. Coming up, these are normally around the last Friday of the month. So August 27th, we will be featuring actually Dr. Johnson, who is pictured in one of the previous photos, who is also on our Brookstown event. Will be sharing the history of the Emerywood community with us, and that'll be August 27th at 12 p.m. As always, you can RSVP through durhamcommunityengagement.org. And we're always looking for more community stories. Again, we're focusing on the history of probably forgotten or overlooked stories, kind of like Dr. Mafo brought forward, this Algonquin Club story, which could have very easily been lost to history. So if you have suggestions of other communities that we should highlight within Durham, please let us know. We're always looking for people to be able to share these kinds of stories with us. And that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.